Grey sky hangs low over Manhattan in winter, exhaust from cement mixers swirling through the cold air, and somewhere in a steakhouse on East 46th Street, a man who controls every foundation poured in this city is about to die. If you love stories about power built not with guns but with cement, control exercised through union cards instead of muscle, and empires concealed inside legitimate business ledgers, make sure to follow, because this one ends with blood on Fifth Avenue and an entire industry shaking itself free from a grip that lasted 15 years. New York City, autumn 1976. The line of black limousines stretches for blocks outside Our Lady of Grace Church in Brooklyn. Inside the casket lies Carlo Gambino, the most powerful crime boss in America, dead of natural causes at age 74 in his home on Long Island. FBI agents photograph every face entering the church. They count over 300 mourners. Politicians send flowers. Judges and construction executives stand shoulder to shoulder with made men. The newspapers call him boss of bosses. Though Gambino himself preferred silence to spectacle, he ran the largest of New York's 5 families for 19 years without a single day in prison, building something more profitable than bootlegging or gambling ever was. He built an empire from cement. The transition happens quietly. No blood, no war. Just the reading of a will that shocks half the family. Paul Castellano becomes boss, not Agnello della Croce, the underboss who everyone expected to take over. Not one of the old street guys who came up through Murder Incorporated. Castellano is Gambino's brother-in-law, a man who prefers 3-piece suits to leather jackets, business meetings to card games, and most importantly, a man who sees organized crime as exactly that. Organized, methodical corporate. He operates from a mansion on Tot Hill in Staten Island that everyone calls the White House. 17 rooms, indoor pool, manicured gardens. He holds court there like a chief executive, and his primary asset is not drugs or extortion. It is construction. The Gambino family already controls Teamsters Local 282, the union that represents every cement truck driver in New York City and Long Island. Without trucks, there is no cement. Without cement, there is no construction. Castellano understands this leverage better than anyone. In 1977, he begins consolidating power with the other families, creating something that sounds innocuous but operates like a noose around the neck of every developer in the city. They call it the Concrete Club. Reconstructed scene based on testimony. A restaurant in Little Italy, summer 1978. Around a table sit representatives from the Gambino, Genovese, Colombo, and Lucchese families. No weapons, no shouting. Just 4 men dividing up billions of dollars in construction contracts like corporate executives at a board meeting. The rule they establish is simple and absolute. Any concrete construction project valued over $2 million in New York City must use contractors approved by the club. Those contractors must purchase their cement from suppliers controlled by the club, and everyone pays a tax of 2% of the total contract value, delivered in cash, divided among the families. Projects under $2 million pay 1%. The contractors have no choice. If they refuse, their union workers walk off the job. Their cement deliveries stop. Their projects die. The companies that supply the concrete are S&A Concrete, controlled by Anthony Salerno of the Genovese family, and Paul Castellano of the Gambinos, and Certified Concrete, also linked to Salerno. The union that controls the cement workers is Local 6A of the Laborers International, run by Ralph Scopo, a soldier in the Colombo family. The union that controls the drivers is Local 282, run by John Cody, who answers directly to the Gambinos. Every piece moves in coordination. Every flow of money gets monitored. Every developer in New York understands that building above a certain size means paying tribute. The money is enormous. In 1980, New York experiences a construction boom unlike anything since the post-war years. Battery Park City, Trump Tower, the Jacob Javits Convention Center, Olympic Tower, Trump Plaza. Every one of these projects requires concrete, thousands of cubic yards of it, and every cubic yard flows through companies that pay the mob. The contractors who win the bids are selected not by competitive pricing, but by rotation among club members. One project goes to Cedar Park Concrete, the next to Dick Underhill, then to XLO Concrete. They submit fake bids to create the appearance of competition, but the winner is decided before the envelopes are opened. The losers get compensated on future projects. No one undercuts, no one breaks ranks, the system is airtight. FBI surveillance tapes captured later reveal how it works. A contractor named Fred DeMatteis testifies in 1986 that he met with Ralph Scopo in 1981. Scopo told him directly, "There are wise guys who run the club, and they belong to the 4 crime families in New York City. If you want to pour concrete, you deal with them." DeMatteis paid. Everyone paid. The alternative was seeing your project delayed indefinitely, while cement trucks sat idle and workers found reasons not to show up. The surveillance begins in earnest in 1983. The FBI gets court approval to plant bugs in 3 locations: Paul Castellano's mansion on Staten Island, Anthony Salerno's social club on East 116th Street in East Harlem, and the Casa Storta restaurant in Brooklyn where Colombo family members meet. The agents face one major problem at Castellano's house. The mansion has tight security, guard dogs, high walls, motion sensors. Getting inside to install listening devices requires planning and patience. The breakthrough comes when Castellano's wife and housekeeper both leave for a few hours. FBI technicians enter through a basement window, crawl through the walls, and plant microphones in the kitchen and dining room, where Castellano conducts most of his business meetings. Over the next 18 months, those bugs record hundreds of hours of conversation, discussions about concrete contracts, arguments over territory, complaints about greedy contractors, plans to intimidate union officials who step out of line, and most damaging of all, references to the Commission, the ruling body of the New York Mafia that oversees all major criminal activities in the city. The Commission had existed since 1931, created by Lucky Luciano to prevent the kind of gang wars that marked the Prohibition era. By the 1980s, it functions as a board of directors. The bosses of the 5 families meet periodically to resolve disputes, authorize hits, and divide profits from major rackets. The Concrete Club is one of those rackets, and the Commission oversees its operation. Every family gets a cut. Every family enforces the rules. On May 4, 1984, FBI agents listening to bugs in Salerno's social club hear him discussing an upcoming meeting. The recording is scratchy, but the message is clear. The bosses are gathering. Agents scramble to identify the location. Tips from informants, surveillance photos, and intercepted phone calls point to a house on Cameron Avenue in Staten Island, owned by a relative of Thomas Bellotti, Castellano's driver and bodyguard. The house sits in a quiet residential neighborhood. On the afternoon of the meeting, unmarked FBI vans park 2 blocks away. Agents with telephoto cameras document every arrival. Paul Castellano steps out of a black Lincoln wearing a gray suit. Anthony Salerno arrives in a Cadillac, his bulk unmistakable. Carmine Persico from the Colombo family. Antonio Corallo from the Lucchese family. All the major bosses gathered in one room. The FBI cannot hear what they say, but the photographs alone are gold. This is the Commission meeting to discuss business, and that business includes concrete. The indictments come down in February 1985. United States Attorney Rudolph Giuliani holds a press conference and announces charges under the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, known as RICO. The defendants include Paul Castellano, Anthony Salerno, Carmine Persico, Antonio Corallo, and 4 others. The charges: running a criminal enterprise, extorting construction companies, rigging bids, and controlling labor unions through violence and intimidation. The Concrete Club is named explicitly in the indictment. The evidence includes surveillance tapes, testimony from contractors, financial records showing cash payments that match the 2% tax, and photographs from the Staten Island meeting. Castellano is 69 years old and facing life in prison. His health is declining. He suffers from diabetes. His grip on the Gambino family weakens. Within the family, a faction led by Agnello della Croce resents Castellano's corporate style and his distance from traditional street operations. They see him as soft, more businessman than gangster. Among this faction is John Gotti, a captain who runs crews in Queens and has been pushing drugs despite Castellano's orders against it. Della Croce, the underboss, keeps the peace between Castellano and Gotti, but in December 1985, Della Croce dies of lung cancer. The buffer is gone. December 16, 1985. Monday evening, rush hour. The streets of Manhattan are packed with commuters heading home. Paul Castellano has a reservation at Sparks Steakhouse on East 46th Street, between 2nd and 3rd Avenues. He arrives at 1725 in a black Lincoln Town car, driven by Thomas Bellotti. As the car pulls up to the curb, 3 men in identical trench coats and fur hats approach from different angles. They open fire with semi-automatic pistols. Castellano is hit 6 times, Bellotti 4 times. Both men die on the sidewalk. The shooters vanish into the crowd. Witnesses describe chaos, but cannot provide clear descriptions of the killers. Within minutes, police seal the block. Within hours, investigators know this was not a random hit. This was a coup. John Gotti orchestrated the murder. He and his crew, including Salvatore Gravano, watched from a car parked across the street. As soon as Castellano fell, Gotti drove past the scene, looked at the bodies, and drove away. Within days, he declared himself boss of the Gambino family. No vote, no approval from the commission, just power seized at gunpoint. The move breaks every rule of Mafia protocol, but Gotti does not care. He represents a return to the old ways, to violence and spectacle, to running the family like a street gang instead of a corporation. But the Concrete Club dies with Castellano. The commission trial moves forward. In September 1986, the trial begins in federal court in Manhattan. The prosecution presents 75 witnesses, thousands of hours of surveillance tapes, and mountains of financial records. The defense argues that the defendants are legitimate businessmen, unfairly targeted by the government. The jury does not buy it. On November 19, 1986, all 8 defendants are convicted on all counts. Anthony Salerno, Carmine Persico, Antonio Corallo, and 5 others are found guilty of operating the commission as a criminal enterprise. On January 13, 1987, Judge Richard Owen sentences each of them to 100 years in federal prison, the maximum penalty allowed under RICO. The convictions shatter the Concrete Club. The contractors who paid tribute are freed from the system. New companies enter the market. Union leaders connected to the mob are removed. The FBI and the New York State Organized Crime Task Force launch additional investigations into construction corruption. In 1988, the city establishes the New York City Construction Fraud Task Force. In 1992, the state creates the Business Integrity Commission to monitor the construction industry and prevent organized crime from re-establishing control. The financial impact is staggering. Prosecutors estimate that the Concrete Club inflated construction costs in New York by 10 to 20% throughout the 1980s. Every major project, from luxury condos to public housing, cost more because of the mob tax. Taxpayers bore the burden on government projects. Developers passed the costs to buyers on private projects. The total amount extorted over 15 years is estimated at hundreds of millions of dollars, possibly exceeding $1 billion when adjusted for inflation. The money funded murder, drug trafficking, loan sharking, and the continued operation of organized crime across the city. But beyond the money, the Concrete Club represents something darker: the capture of an entire industry by criminal organizations. For 15 years, no one could build in New York without mob approval. Legitimate contractors were shut out or forced to pay. Union workers were exploited. Safety standards were ignored. Projects were delayed or rushed, depending on whether tribute was paid on time. The foundations of some of New York's most iconic buildings were poured by companies controlled by men who answered to the commission before they answered to building codes. The legacy persists. In 2011, federal prosecutors charged members of the Colombo family with continuing to control Local 6A, the Cement Workers Union. The charges allege that even after the commission trial, the family maintained influence through Ralph Scopo Jr., the son of the man convicted in 1986. In 2023, investigators report that organized crime has made attempts to re-infiltrate the construction industry, targeting non-union projects where oversight is weaker. The battle is not over. It has simply moved to new fronts. Paul Castellano never stood trial. He died on a sidewalk before he could hear the verdict that would have sent him to prison for life. His killer, John Gotti, became boss and ruled the Gambino family until his own arrest in 1990. Gotti was convicted in 1992, largely because his underboss, Salvatore Gravano, turned government witness and testified against him. Gotti died in prison in 2002. The Gambinos continue to operate, but they no longer control construction. The Concrete Club is history. The trials of the 1980s proved that RICO could dismantle even the most entrenched criminal enterprises. Giuliani's prosecutions set a template that law enforcement still uses today. But they also revealed how deeply organized crime had penetrated legitimate industry. The mob did not just extort construction companies. They became construction companies. They did not just threaten union leaders. They were union leaders. The line between legal and illegal was not a line at all. It was a carefully managed illusion. Walk through Manhattan today and look at the skyline. Trump Tower, the atrium at Olympic Tower, Battery Park City, these structures rose during the height of the Concrete Club's power. Their foundations were poured by companies that paid tribute to men like Castellano and Salerno. The cement trucks that delivered the material were driven by teamsters who answered to the mob. The workers who mixed and poured the concrete were represented by unions controlled by the families. Every cubic yard of cement, every steel beam, every construction permit carried the invisible stamp of organized crime. New York City, winter 2025. The construction industry is transparent, competitive, regulated. The mob's grip is broken. But the story of the Concrete Club remains a warning. When organized crime moves beyond drugs and gambling into infrastructure, the damage is measured not in bodies but in billions. The victims are not just contractors or union members. They are everyone who lives in the buildings, walks on the sidewalks, and drives over the bridges built with cement controlled by criminals. The cost is hidden in every concrete foundation, every steel beam, every brick laid during those years when the mob did not just steal from New York. They built it.